Mr. Kushner, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you again.
Thank you. We know that you have a very busy schedule, so we're trying to get into the most important questions. President Trump had a vision when he went to Saudi Arabia. He didn't go to Mexico, he didn't go to Canada. He wanted a vision for the Middle East on the first trip. You were there. He assigned you this because he trusted you. Now we have seen an agreement with two Arab countries in a historical day today in the White House. What was the most challenging things that you faced trying to come up with this agreement and get two countries to agree to it?
So that's actually a great question. I think that over the last 3.5 years, the hardest thing that we've been fighting against is just habit. People have a way of thinking where they can complain about the problem, but they can't offer a solution forward. And the solutions that people turn to are not workable solutions. People point to the Arab Peace Initiative, which was a very noble effort when it was done in 2002, but if it would have worked, then there would have been peace 15, 20 years ago. So the reality is that was not a viable pathway to make things through. Saudi Arabia also had a vision, along with President Trump, to host him for that initial trip. And at that initial trip, we assembled the leaders of the 54 Muslim and Arab countries to get everyone together and say, we have some problems in the Middle East. It's been going on for a long time. In America, we're afraid of terrorism, and we're afraid of people who are funding terrorism and people who are perverting the Islamic religion to push extremism. What can we do about it? ISIS at the time had a huge caliphate the size of Ohio right in the middle of the Middle East. Iraq was destabilized, Syria was destabilized, Yemen was destabilized, and Iran was running rampant and actually causing a lot of the destabilization. So President Trump said to everybody, we need new ideas, we need a new pathway. And what he's done over the last year is he's listened to all of the different partners that we have in the region. We've brought America's relationship closer with Saudi Arabia, closer with Qatar, closer with UAE, closer with Bahrain, closer with Israel. And through that, we came up with a new pathway to push forward to try to figure out how do you untangle the knot that the Middle East is. So the hardest thing we've been fighting against is habit. And President Trump realizes why it's so strategically important to fix the Middle East, because the potential there is unlimited if we can make some tough decisions now that will have big payoff for the world later on.
Actually, to emphasize what you said, we heard from the Emiratis and the Bahrainis. They said that the conflict is very old conflict. The methods is no longer right to deal with it, and therefore we have to think of a new way of solving the conflict. But they insist the principles are the same, which is two-state solution. Now, you've been working for a long time, for 3 years almost, trying to get the Palestinians to the table. What can you do at this stage to convince them that the benefit is in their interest to come? What can you do to entice them to come to the table?
So I feel like at this point with the Palestinians, we've done our job, right? In the sense that what we've done is we've laid out a plan, which is 180 pages. We were in Bahrain, we laid out an economic plan where we think we can create 1 million new Palestinian jobs. We can double their GDP, make their standard of living much better, reduce their poverty rate by 50%. It's actually not that hard. And every CEO from major companies around the world said we'd actually die to go and invest in the West Bank and Gaza and figure out how we can make Palestine viable, because the Palestinian people are phenomenal people. But it's not a climate that's investable right now. You need a certain governance structure, you need security away from terrorism. And if you have that, then people could actually make the Palestinian lives better. So what's holding them back right now is really the Palestinian leadership. And so from our point of view, we're ready. We have discussions with a lot of people. When they're ready to make a change, we can get them there. And if you think about what we've accomplished too, when we started, Israel would not say they were for a two-state solution. Now Israel's saying they are for a two-state solution. Israel was unwilling to do a map. Now Israel has laid out very clearly a map at which they're willing to resolve the issue. Is it the perfect map? Yeah, they could always move things here and there to fix it up, but at the end of the day, if the Palestinians want a state, President Trump can deliver that to them, but he can't want it for them more than they want it for themselves. And I will say that if you look at what the United Arab Emirates did today and what Bahrain did today, they will have more influence to help Israel solve the Palestinian issue as allies and normalized countries with Israel than they would having no say at the table. So the more that this goes on, the more that you'll see interaction between Emirati businessmen and Bahraini businessmen along with Israeli businessmen. They'll be seeing each other's cultural sites. They'll be getting to know each other. And we'll realize there aren't that big differences between the people, and we all want the same thing, which is we want better lives, we respect each other, we want to live in a safe place, and the Middle East has tremendous potential if we all work together to seize it. So for the Palestinians, it's got to be up to their leadership when they're ready to do it. And quite frankly, I don't know if they're incentivized to make a deal because their lives are fine and maybe they like the status quo. But the moment that they're ready to change the status quo, America and everyone else will rush to help them make a great deal that will make the Palestinian people's lives better. And I think it could happen very quickly, but they've got to be willing to do it.
So Bahrain and United Arab Emirates will be an asset to the Palestinians, just like Egypt and Jordan, who signed a peace agreement with Israel before. But if the Palestinians stay where they are, will the administration, should President Trump win the next term, either carry on with the Israeli part of the agreement or look for new leadership?
It's not our job to look for new leadership. I think that, they obviously have to determine now. They do have a little bit of an issue, right? Because they had an election, right? They haven't had an election now. I think it's 15 years or 16 years. So you have a leader there. It's not really a democracy at this point, right? Because he's in the 16th year of a 4-year term. So I do think it's tough for the people because they may want change, but they don't really have an avenue to get change. So that is challenging. But from our point of view, we're going to focus on continuing to work with Iran to try to, curl back their aggression. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon for as long as Donald Trump is president. We'll work to make sure that they're not funding the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas and all and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and all the different terror groups that Iran funds. And we'll work to contain that. And so President Trump will continue to find new ideas, creative ideas for how do we make the Palestinian people's lives better. And that's what we're going to really be focused on.
Right. And the president said he wants to marginalize the radicals and the extremists and empower the moderates. So in this point specifically, he also said he's willing to talk with the Iranians, but not with conditions.
Yeah.
Without conditions. Is this a message as well for them today, that look at other countries, that they consider Iran as a threat to them, Israel, the Gulf states, many countries in the region? So do you believe that the president also wanted to tell the Iranians clearly, you join us as well like everybody else, or you will continue with maximum pressure campaign with the sanctions?
100%. President Trump will keep the maximum pressure campaign going until we have an outcome that is appropriate. And he's willing to meet with anyone, right? He met with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. He's willing to meet with the Iranians and discuss things. He's not going to pay for a meeting, right? So he's not going to make concessions in order to do it. And quite frankly, their situation in Iran is getting more and more dire by the day. But he does want a situation where they can, again, give their people freedom and give their people opportunity. You look what's happened in Saudi Arabia over the last 3 years, right? They've given people more freedoms. They've given them more restrictions. They've invested in society. They're trying to figure out how do you give people the ability to have a brighter future. And that's what all countries should be doing. And so we want Iran to do the same, and we want the Palestinians to do the same. So, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian, we all want the same things, right? We want the ability to worship however we feel is appropriate. We want the ability to have a job and to have the opportunity to make a good living. And we want our children to be able to live better than we live. And that's a common thing, regardless of where the border is drawn. So President Trump is trying to bring people together around a common vision of the future, as opposed to allowing everyone to be stuck based on conflicts of the past that, quite frankly, and the old ways of doing it haven't worked. So we need to try new things. Maybe we need to deal with new people. But I will tell the old guard, whether it's in Iran or whether it's the Palestinian leadership, is that the young generation wants to move forward, and they will leave you behind. And so what you're seeing today with the signing of these 2 peace deals is that you have very dynamic leaders trying to take their countries to the future. And that's the trend of where the Middle East is going, because it's very popular there. People want to see it. And if leaders aren't going to be with trying to create a brighter future, I don't think their populations are going to stand for it.
I know your time is very limited, so one last question about other countries. What does it take to involve other countries? The president talked about 4 or 5 maybe, and a message for the new generation, this generation who's sick and tired of war, and they wanted a normal life. They want peace, they want prosperity, they want opportunities. What can you say to the young people in the Middle East? How can they join the process and make it a warm peace?
Sure. Number one is Israel is not your enemy, right? What you've been taught about Israel is they are not your enemy. Number 2 is we all want to help the Palestinians, but the Palestinians have to help themselves. And number 3 is that, there's a lot of great countries in the Middle East. There's a lot of great people in the Middle East, and we have to take ownership over owning a brighter future. And so my generation, what we have to be looking at is who's trying to cause trouble, right? And you look at who is against this deal, and that's very telling as to who is not for progress, who is not for peace. And those are people who are trying to, they're trying to create division in order to keep their power so they can repress. And quite frankly, they abuse the Islamic religion, because what they do is they try to preach a version of it that is more about them maintaining power than it is about actual the religious practice as it's taught. So I think that what you're seeing is, for the young generation, is they just have to say, encourage their leadership, applaud the bold moves that they're taking, and ask them to try new things, to reach out to old foes. And I feel like no one has to be a natural enemy with each other, right? None of us are, we shouldn't have hatred in our hearts. We should only try to get to know each other. If there's a misunderstanding, let's try to understand each other's perspective. And it's only through dialogue and growth and exploration that we can reach out and form new alliances and create a better future. But the future will be what we make it. It doesn't have to be something bad because it's been bad. And I do think that the next generation has a lot of power to express to their leaders that they want change, they want more opportunity. And I think the leadership right now in the Middle East is hearing that. And you're seeing some phenomenal change in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, in Bahrain, in Israel, and in a lot of places.
Inshallah, we see peace everywhere, as we say. Thank you, Mr. Kushner, very much for this time. I know you made